15.
You want to start?
Yes, sir. So I'll do a quicker introduction. So, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Chief Newsome, the Secretary of the Huachuca Rocks. So essentially what we are is a mentorship organization that are really aimed at providing mentorship, guidance, and just LPDs for warrant officers, DA civilians, and officers and NCOs across the community. So MI, cyber, signal, EW, we want to get as many in as possible just so we can collaborate and share intelligence information just so we can continue to evolve as a group. So today we're going to have an LPD with Mr. May. It's really going to be on utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies in order to ensure that our organization, the military, is able to effectively challenge our adversaries in the next generation of war. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. May and we will begin.
Hey, thanks, Chief. So before I go, can I get a quick sound check from anybody that's online just to confirm you can hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So my name again, Dave May. I'm the Senior Cyber Intel Advisor out at the Cyber Center of Excellence. I had a 26-year active duty career where most of my time was spent working with the National Security Agency with and for them in some capacity. Toward the end of my career, I got a little bit of cyber stink on me, worked up at U.S. Cyber Command, and then with the Joint Force Headquarters, Army Cyber at what is now known as Fort Eisenhower. I've been serving with the Cyber Center of Excellence for almost 8 years as the Intel advisor, but my portfolio includes offensive and defensive cyber, electronic warfare, but most importantly, integrating with the intelligence community across our portfolio to ensure that we are bringing in intel equities and integrating appropriately with the DAG2, DAG3, and across the board. This invitation actually came out to General Stanton a little while ago, and he was kind enough to delegate it to me since I was coming out here for the Force Integration Review Board. We just finished that with General Hale a couple hours ago. And during that time frame, we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence, which is the topic for today's discussion. But I'm not going to give it to you from an ethereal perspective. My goal today is we'll start at a high level, but I want to give you a practical application that I'm hoping that the Intel community, the people online here today, will help bring as a capability to your soldiers within the next 12 months.
Stop, Toby, please.
I'm sorry? Okay. So with that said, let's go to the first slide. Okay, great. So I know we have a lot of smart people in the room and online. I'm not going to ask individual questions, but I would venture to guess, since we have smart warrant officers and NCOs in the room, that you generally have a pretty good understanding of what AI is. But I will tell you, in audiences that I talk to across the board, the definitions vary. It is certainly not Skynet from the Terminator. We're not talking sentient beings. I think a practical definition for the purposes of this discussion would be that AI and ML are computer systems that can perform tasks that were generally relegated to human intelligence. And I'm talking about rationalization, problem solving, decision making, natural language use. So those are the types of technologies. If we go to the next slide, please, you'll see here we have a list of this set of technologies that AI encompasses as an umbrella term. And I would venture to guess that each and every person in this room and online uses at least one of these technologies in the last 24 hours. Whether you got out of bed and you went over to your Google Mini or Amazon and said, hey, tell me about my day, and it popped up the weather and what was on your calendar, and then served up a menu of different types of news broadcasts that you had. Or perhaps you went on to Facebook and it served you up a variety of different tailored advertisements based off your search history. There are a variety of different ways that this could be used. You picked up your telephone today and it opened up because it did voice recognition. Or perhaps you're lucky enough to drive a Tesla and you put it in autopilot mode today and it drove you to work. All those are examples of AI being used in your everyday lives. But today we're going to specifically focus on one particular technology, and that is the large language model. Next slide, please. So just by a show of hands in the room, everyone here familiar with ChatGPT? Raise your hand. How many of you guys are power users, actually have the application on your phone? Okay, great. I've got some power users. I'll be honest with you. When I first got a hold of ChatGPT, I was wowed. I could not believe that it could serve up the level of responses to a wide variety of questions that I would pose, from everything in my daily life to work problems, to things that my kids needed help with for homework. It could respond at a pretty decent level. Now, if you're not familiar with how the tool works, we could spend an hour walking through it. I had the opportunity to go up to MIT and do a 3-day course on large language models, and we're not going to get into the details here. Suffice to say that large language models are very, very good at predicting the next word, and then the next word after that, and so on, based off of a query that you enter in. And it's done based off this huge swath of data that it is trained on. In 2020, ChatGPT 3.0 was trained on, you can see it up here, I think it says 300 billion words. They actually do it in parameters, which are basically bits of words, and it's probably 600 to 700 billion words that this thing was trained on. ChatGPT 4.0, which if you buy the subscription today, that's what you're using, that was trained on somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 trillion parameters. And I read this weekend that ChatGPT 5.0 will have somewhere in the neighborhood, will have been trained on somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70 trillion parameters. So large, in fact, that they're having difficulty finding quality data across the internet for the next generation of these tools. I think it's also important to note that it costs these companies who are producing these models, like OpenAI, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million a run to train these tools. So big money, big compute and store being used to generate these capabilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture. Now I want to walk you through the drivers behind a proof of concept that we developed at the Cyber Center. And it's practical to you because I'm hoping to offer this to the Intel community in the very near term. But there's going to be work on your end to make it a reality. And I'll explain all that here in just a little bit. But the tool that I'm going to talk to you about is called Cyber Copilot. It is tied to, as you've probably heard of, Microsoft Copilot, which is another large language model. We kind of stole the name. Yes, there might be some copyright infringement. Don't tell anybody. But the idea behind all this came from a couple memos. The first one was in February of 2022, where the Secretary of the Army published a memo and said that our Army has to become more data-centric. And really, she was looking at business practices across the Army. If you take a look at a commercial company, they're using data to drive profits. And the data that they are using and the analytics behind that are helping the companies make decisions on where they need to invest. We're not doing that very well in the Army. So she came out and said the Army needs to become more data-centric. And we need to be leveraging emerging technologies sooner than later. About a year later, she, along with the Chief of Staff of the Army, General George, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, published a memo to the force, you can see there on the right-hand side, where they talked about 4 priorities. One of those priorities was continuous transformation. And as it says down there, we need to be integrating technology faster as soon as it is practical for the workforce. So at the Cyber Center, we said, okay, we're supposed to be more data-centric. What data as a center of excellence do we own? Well, we write our own doctrine. We go out and we capture lessons learned, best practices, and TTPs from the operational force. We put those into manuals for people to see. But most importantly, we run 3 schoolhouses. We have the Signal School, we have the Cyber and Electronic Warfare School, and we have the NCO Academy. And all of those have a ton of classes. We run somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 different courses across our schoolhouses. So that's some pretty decent data there. And it's unique. So we thought through, how can we make this data relevant to our soldiers today? Next slide. And then the big idea came. Well, why don't we take a already existing pre-trained large language model and enrich it with relevant data that we own? Would that be useful to our soldiers? And hence we started this project. And the project consisted of a couple pieces, and you see some of the big things there. One, we had to have a publicly available large language model. And when I brought this to General Stanton, my boss, he's kind of like General Applehans. He's got a lot of things going on. I don't think there's anybody here who would say that you have more resources and manpower than you have things to do, right? On a day-to-day basis. I brought this idea to him to his benefit and ours. He did not say no, but yet he said, well, you have a shoestring budget. So figure out how you're going to do this as an additional duty for everybody involved, and you don't have any money. So the large language model had to be free. Secondly, it had to be able to ingest the data that we wanted to provide to it. Not all large language models can do that if you're not familiar with playing around with these. We had to create our own user interface that could accept queries and provide responses. Security was something that was important to us because obviously we didn't want China to get a hold of this. So it had to be compliant with security standards. It had to correctly respond to some level of satisfaction. We put a benchmark when we initially did this as a proof of concept of 70% accuracy was our goal. And then lastly, something General Stanton threw on the table, he said, I wanted to provide references to authoritative documents. So when you go into ChatGPT and ask it a question, it gives you a good answer, but you don't know exactly where it got that or where derived that answer from. Our tool, we wanted to come back and said, yeah, that was FM 2.0 or ATP such and such, or go to the Captain Career course, this module for that answer, so that a soldier, warrant officer, or officer could go back and check to confirm it was the right thing, or maybe they wanted to do some additional research to get smart. So that was a key component to this effort. Next slide, please. We broke it down into 4 lines of effort, and I'm showing this to you because, again, foot stomp, this is something that we're going to ask you to do, at least LOE 1 and 4 of this. So please pay close attention. First line of effort was data gathering, and I'm here to tell you that that is the most difficult part of this effort. So some of this can be scraped, like I can go to ADP, Army Publishing Directorate, and I can scrape the applicable regulations and doctrine with a simple script. That's not too tough. But if I want my courses, that's not so easy. Now, for those, anybody in here an instructor or was an instructor? Okay, so you'd say, well, we have this thing in TRADOC called TDC, right? What does TDC stand for? For those online, Training Development Curriculum. What it really is a very poorly built database that none of the instructors like to use. So what you might find in there are collective and individual tasks. You might find some lesson plans, but what you won't find is course content. At least my experience was that the course content, depending on the class, was a hit or miss. And so as we dug through this, instructors would have a variety of different medium, whether it is PowerPoint slides or videos, or you have it, but they'd keep it on their own personal laptop, and they would modify it based off the way that they like to present material. That makes perfect sense to me, except if I'm looking for a specific set of course content for a 35 Foxtrot course, well, where do I go? Where do I get that? Who has that particular set of data? And we were really challenged in bringing all that together. LOE number 2, use case development. We identified several thousand question and answer pairings. Think of this as Quizlets or check on learning, right? Things that you would ask soldiers. You know what the answer is to a question you pose. But we put all that together to help train the model. The third LOE, and I will tell you right up front, I used a super high-speed lieutenant from our Cyber's Technical Warfare Center. He was my programmer. This guy, even though he's a lieutenant, he's written 2 books, he understands AI, and he did all the coding for us. But basically, his job was to curate all the data, to build out the user interface, to refine and experiment with the large language model, and then deploy it for assessment. And on the assessment side of the house, we took instructors and course developers, and we said, take questions from your courses or your exams, midpoint and endpoint, feed them into the model and see how well they respond. And then we graded it accordingly, trying to get to that 70 percentile mark. Well, lo and behold, to our chagrin, it worked. Along the way, General Beagle, who's the CAC commander, was visiting out at Fort Eisenhower, and General Stanton, not having seen this tool, said, I want you to demo it for General Beagle. I said, sir, are you sure you want me to do this? We haven't gone through assessment yet. It's not really ready for prime time. He put us on the spot. We did it. General Beagle was wowed. Completed the assessment, got it all ready, and we were directed to brief General Brito, the 4-star commander, TRADOC commander, for those of you who don't know him. And he came back also, hey, this is a capability we need in TRADOC, but not for the reasons that we built the tool. And I'll explain that in just a minute. But before I go any further, I want to give you a quick demo of how this thing works. And I built in some prompts so that we can make this go a little faster. Chief, is there a way that you can do it on the screen? Okay, great. So I'm going to walk you through a couple prompts here. What did I do with my sheet? I got it. Okay, when we built this tool, we built it with the operational soldier in mind. And remember, I'm from the Cyber Center, where we have signal, cyber, electromagnetic warfare soldiers. So first scenario, I'm a G6 out at NTC. And my commander comes to me and says, hey, I'm worried about how I look in the electromagnetic spectrum. What kind of emissions controls can you do for me? So the first question we're going to ask this is, how do I increase the survivability of a command post through electromagnetic spectrum emissions control? So, Chief, I can't see it from here. Can you read that to us? Well, they won't be able to hear.
Electromagnetic spectrum emission control refers to the measures taken to protect sensitive electronic systems from unwanted electromagnetic interference and radio frequency emissions. By controlling these emissions, command posts can reduce the risk of interference from other sources, such as other communication devices, electronic equipment, or natural phenomena. Here are some of the tips how to increase the survivability of command posts with EMS EC.
Okay, just read the first line of each one of those.
The first line is conduct an EM-RF survey. Second line, use EM-FR shielding. Third line, use low emission equipment. Fourth line, implement filtering and attenuation. Fifth line, maintain a good grounding system. Okay, not a bad response, but let's say I don't like it. I didn't point out the fact that this user interface is built to look and sound and feel just like ChatGPT. So the users have an immediate familiarity with how it works. And the ways you can interact with this tool are very similar. So let's say I don't like that response. Chief, go ahead and click right there. And now the thing is giving us a different response, which is similar, but different. And if you've ever played with ChatGPT, you recognize that you're not getting a canned response each time. Okay, Chief, do me a favor. Can you type from there? Okay, go ahead and in the box, type in, what is the reference for this response? And if you can see there, it says ATP-6.02, such and such, and then it gives you the specific parameters. So if you ask this question and you didn't think you got a proper response, you could go to the ATP, you could look it up for yourself. Okay, second example.
go up to the upper left-hand corner and just click new chat. Let's clear that up. Go to all the way over. Yeah, okay. So second example. So I'm a cyber defender. I'm part of the cyber protection brigade. And my job is to secure networks, right? So I get an order, I need to go out and check out this new NATO network. Never been on it before. I don't know what's going on. One of the things, just like a good intel soldier, we look for attack vectors, right? And when you're looking at a network, the first thing you do on a network is you check to see what kind of open ports are available. So let's ask, but as a cyber protector, I'm supposed to know how to write code. But maybe I forgot my code book back at Fort Eisenhower. I'm on deployment. So I'm going to ask it to help me. I'm going to say, create a Python script to scan for all ports on a network. Report all open ports. So as you can see, the tool is now generating code to tell me exactly how to do that. Now, I'm not going to ask you to read all this, but it's for those of you online, you can probably read along and see that it explains it. Notice it says that you're not supposed to be doing this unless it's for ethical purposes. Now, Chief, go down and now I want everybody to just take a quick look at that code. Just take a quick look. Now hit refresh. And most likely, it's going to give you a different set of code that will perform the same function. So I share this with you so you know that this isn't canned. The system is doing it on the fly. All right, let's go ahead and clear that out. Now, remember, I told you that General Brito wanted this tool for the TRADOC workforce. When we built it with the operational soldier in mind in garrison or in the field. But what we realized along the way was it had great utility for instructors, for course developers, basically for the institutional force. So I am an instructor at the Signal School, and I've got a bunch of AIT soldiers, and we've just gone over antenna theory, and we've talked about the different types of antenna, and I want to check on their skill level. So I'm going to ask it to create a check on learning on how to set up and tear down an OE 2x4 OE 254 ground antenna. And as you can see, this is giving you a step-by-step process on what's expected. Okay, last one. Let's say you are a warrant officer instructor, and you've just given your WOBIC class discussion about leadership, and you've required them to read a book on Gettysburg. So I'm going to tell, but as an instructor, I'm lazy. I'm kind of lazy because I want to go out and drink tonight. So I'm going to ask it to create a writing prompt for me because I don't want to have to figure it out, and come up with a grading rubric on leadership failures during the Battle of Gettysburg that I can use in my class. Where are we, Chief? No, just go back up to the. Did you kill it? And as you can see, very similar to ChatGPT, it generates not only the rubric, but as we wait, it will come up with a way to grade this thing out. So something that an instructor would find very helpful as they go along and prepare their classes on a day-to-day basis. And this can be done for just about anything as long as you feed it the data in advance. Okay, we can play around with this a little later, but let me finish up with the LPD and then we can go back and talk about it. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so a couple things we learned along the way that I just want to share with you guys, some of the assessments and our takeaways. The first thing we learned is that a very methodical, deliberate approach is necessary if you want to be able to reference with this tool. So as you gather all that data, how you curate it, how you put it into a database, very methodical approach so that the machine can then identify where it's pulling information and provide you that reference. We did not do that well initially as we built this out, because the ingest accounting is critical to its ability to reference. As I mentioned to you, TDC was a big problem for us. So we really have to think through very hard when you're talking about gathering course content. And when I say course content, when I went to school, they handed us a textbook. I know we don't do that anymore, but that's what I mean by course content. Not individual and collective tasks, not lessons plan, the actual material that a soldier needs to learn to execute their mission. That's what I'm referring to. Secondly, query format counts. Believe it or not, there's actually classes that you can take on large language models to how to formulate questions in order to get the best responses out of these tools. When we did the initial assessment, I didn't even think through that. I just asked the instructors to go in and ask you questions. And it was asking questions using a lot of acronyms or in poor English, and we weren't getting the responses that we wanted, and so they graded incorrectly. Where all they had to do is rephrase the question, and you got the answer that you wanted. So I just share that with you, that how you pose a question is directly related to the kind of response you get. And then, as I mentioned in the bottom right-hand corner here, great utility for instructors and course developers. I don't know about the Intel Center of Excellence, but at the Cyber Center of Excellence, we're behind on our POI development. This tool can help you move that forward. All right, 2 more slides. Next slide. So these are just a couple examples of potential applications for the Army, and I highlighted a few that apply to Intel. Obviously, intelligence analysis. I played around with a Paraton tool that took open source feeds, and it would do the analytics for the soldier. It would do predictive analysis, but then it would go back and tell you, okay, I derived this course of action based off the following points, and it would show you, based off of all the data it took in, how it came to that conclusion. Very powerful. Of course, language translation and interpretation. I'm a SIG-enter by heart. I've had linguists under my command for many, many years. I would tell you that where we are with AI, we do not need soldiers to do language translation or graphic translation anymore. Now, we still need them for interrogators, in my opinion, because there's a different skill set. It's not just about being able to speak another language. It's being able to watch the inflection as the person that you're interrogating and how they react, right? So from that, you definitely need human intelligence. But if you're just looking for translation tools, I'm telling you guys, we've come a long way. Our capabilities today, 95% solution. So P2, P3, we're gonna probably have to relook that down the way. Last thing on information warfare. So we struggle in the military with our ability to generate content and really to get content released. These tools can understand culture, and they can shape a marketing campaign specifically to your needs and put it in the language that you need it to be. Very powerful. All right, next slide, and kind of the crux of where I want to take you guys today. So over on the left-hand side of this slide, you see proof of concept. That's what Cyber Copilot was that we ran from July till about January timeframe. General Brito has asked us to move into phase 2. Phase 2 is taking this proof of concept, which we developed on a local server with limited compute and store, to a different level. Put it in a cloud environment with some horsepower behind it, but basically do a wash, rinse, and repeat with the data set that we collected. I think I was the first one to tell you, hey, we didn't gather all the data that we thought we needed to make this tool relevant. We didn't get all the course content. So we're going to redo that specific to the cyber school. We're going to capture all the lessons learned necessary for any center of excellence to be able to do this for themselves. And then we're going to provide it to the Vice Provost of Digital Education, which is under Army University, part of CAC. So then they can go out to every other center of excellence and teach them how to create that corpus of data necessary for you to drive your own tool. So I anticipate the one thing we're waiting on right now is a hosting environment. In order to do this properly, we need to put it in the cloud. It's going to be one user interface to rule them all, a couple different large language models, but most importantly, individual corpuses of data. Think of these as vector databases, where the data sits out there, and then this pre-trained tool reaches out to the database and pulls the data it needs. And so as a soldier, I'll have a drop-down menu, and I can pick the database that I want based off the type of question I'm going to ask it. So if I'm a maneuver soldier, I want to go to the maneuver corpus of data, right? If I'm a sustainment, I might go to the quartermaster database, right? But each one of these things will be purposely driven with the right doctrine, lessons learned, TTPs, and content based off that specific set of MOSs. So we hope to finish that up by October timeframe. At that point, CAC is going to go in to every center of excellence and say, okay, guys, now I need you to do the data gathering for your individual center of excellence. We're going to get all that. We're going to park it in the cloud, and then we're going to tie it to this model that we've built. When I first did this, our plan was to kind of do it on our own. But what I recognized, funding is extremely limited. And so we are now partnering with AI2C. If you don't know who that is, that's the Artificial Intelligence Integration Center. And you may be aware of a tool that they recently rolled out called CamoGPT. CamoGPT is nothing more than a commercial large language model. It's Mistral 7 Bravo, parked on the NIPRNet and parked on the SIPRNet. The great news about it is they've got an ATO, and Netcom allows it to run on their networks, right? You can't get to ChatGPT on the NIPRNet today. I've tried, trust me, but you can get to CamoGPT. So the idea is we build this under a CamoGPT family of systems where AI2C does all the, I'll call it the computer, the IT work behind this, all the programming work. The centers of excellence are responsible for their own data, and TRADOC covers the bills as far as the enterprise compute and store. So that's the game plan right now. But I'm looking to the warrant officers and the NCOs that are part of the Intel community, because you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be asked to pull the data together. All right, let me stop there. We'll go to questions. I'd like to start with the people in the room, and then we'll go out to the people that are virtual. Yes, sir.
Sir, with my experience with CamoGPT, I'm trying to talk loud about everything. CamoGPT is wildly inaccurate. And I'll go so far as to say it's terrible, and I will not use it again. And I'm better off going outside on my phone and using ChatGPT.
Okay.
What's the plan to make it better?
Right. So for those on the line, the comment was the current version of CamoGPT does not perform well. It hallucinates. It doesn't give you correct responses often enough to be value added. And I would be the first one to tell you that's true. And they would tell you that it's a prototype. The reason that CamoGPT is not working well today is because they're using a lightweight LLM, Mistral 7 Bravo. 7 Bravo refers to 7 billion tokens. Remember how I talked to you about ChatGPT being trained on 12 trillion tokens? This one's only been trained on 7 billion. So the smaller the data set, the less performance you get. The benefit of using a lightweight model is you don't need as much compute and store. Our goal is to get TRADOC to pay for the compute and store so that we can then take a more robust large language model. Can you go back to that last slide? So where you see the LLM right there. So CamoGPT right now, you can replace that LLM symbol with Mistral 7 Bravo. My goal is to get a much more robust LLM in there as the final solution. So that's gonna respond or help solve some of your problems. You still need significant compute. Now, I don't want to bore anybody here, but these things run off of GPUs, A100s. NVIDIA A100s is the gold standard right now. And we need about 6 of those to run this for one center of excellence, and then you can do the scaling based off the number of users. So the bill associated with this to initially get it set up is several $100,000. I think to scale it, it will be much smaller for every center of excellence that joins. But the initial startup cost is fairly substantial. The reason it doesn't work today is because they have very limited compute and store, and they're using a lightweight LLM. Oh, by the way, Camo GPT also doesn't leverage any corpus of data other than what's already been trained on. Okay, so I think that I hope I've answered your question. Okay, anybody else in the room? Oh, by the way, if you see A2B2 anywhere here, it's because I originally wanted to name it Army AI Battle Buddy, A2B2. Come on, no laughs, come on. R2B, you don't even see the Star Wars connection. Come on, you guys are nerds. I know you are. Okay, any other questions?
So overall, I think the goal really is to get this down to 4 or 5.
Yes. So 2 different ways we want to have this deployed. And I don't know if it says it on the slide, but one, you should be able to log into it on the internet, like you can today, not the internet, but on the NIPRNet, and get access to it, right? The second way is download it as an application on your phone. Anybody here in the room used bring your own device? Okay. It doesn't work well today, this application, but as you know, they've wrapped it. It's got a security wrapper on it. But you can basically get to your email and to different Microsoft 365 applications using that, download it on your personal device. So imagine in that package of apps, we have a A2B2 or a Camo GPT application that a soldier can then ask questions to. So it's still wrapped in a security bubble. It's still soft cert enabled, but it's available on a soldier's phone. That's the goal.
Will it be able to tie into tactical warfighting systems like CPCE or any of the Intel apps to like refeed information and repopulate?
So that's not the goal of this tool. We can talk about where the Intel community wants to go with Project Linchpin, which is kind of a separate capability. But this would be a set of, from my perspective, unclassified and CUI data. So it'll be IL5 compliant. But it's basically data that the schoolhouse gathers more from an academic perspective, not necessarily operational data. For those types of tools, we need Intel apps, AIDP. I think that's going to be a separate set of capabilities, if that makes sense to you. Okay.
Theoretically, operation soldiers out doing step 3 by IPV. Maybe unclear one of the sub-steps. Theoretically, can use this and ask, hey, what is the sub-step to IPV step 3? Point it directly to the actual doctrine.
You know, that's a great question. In fact, let's do that. Let's pull up the thing, the program here. And let's clear it out, please. And then ask it, what are the 4 steps of the intelligence preparation of the battlefield? I don't want to say IPB. You got to say intelligence preparation.
No, you don't want to say IPV? Yeah, that's a new guy.
Imagine trying to
What are the 4 steps of intelligence preparation of the operational environment? Let's see how it does.
Yeah, I was like, we're matching joint doctrine.
Okay. Now I will tell you that it is getting this answer based off its pre-training, not anything that the Cyber Center fed it, because I did not feed it FM 2.0. So if you wanted to go for a subset, as you just suggested, Chief, it probably would not be able to get you that level of detail.
But it probably contains the outputs.
Perhaps, but if we feed it your doctrine, Intel doctrine, then it would be able to, right? Yeah, so this is not going to give you the right response on the reference. It did? Dang, we got lucky. All right. Okay, anybody else in this room? Okay, I'd like to take some questions from the virtual audience if we have anybody on the line.
Do you want me to ask them here, Jeff, or do you want me to, I wrote them in the chat as well. Over.
You're gonna have to say it out loud because the way we've got it set up,
Okay.
he can't.
All right, I sent a list in the chat, so I apologize. I'll just hit them out. There's only 3 questions. CW2 Travis Weitzel from Netcom G2. Appreciate the presentation, sir. Love what your team's doing. So what I'm trying to understand, is there an API being built to scrape the data from Army pubs versus having people trying to ingest it that way?
Yes, we actually have that capability. We wrote our own. AI2C has the ability. But what I prefer to do is, rather than scrape all of the Army Publishing Directorate, I would ask each center of excellence to identify the relevant doctrine and regulations that are specific to their skills. Because if you go on to ADP, there's a lot of doctrine out there. Now, there are some core level doctrine like FM 3.0 that everybody wants to have, right? But if I'm creating an Intel corpus of data, I probably don't need to know what sustainment Center of Excellence has for their logistics doctrine. So rather than scrape all of ADP, we find that these corpuses of data, if you want a very specific response to a specific query, you don't want to have so much data that it becomes a generalized answer. So I guarantee you, if you asked ChatGPT 4.0 very specific questions, many times you're going to get a generalized answer. Our goal here is to give very specific doctrine or course curriculum related responses to specific MOS questions.
Okay.
The bottom line is yes, we do have the ability to scrape this. We can scrape call, Center of Army Lessons Learned. We can scrape where the manual processes will probably come into play is when it comes to course content. We can even scrape TDC if you want us to, but you better make sure all your data is in there. And what we found at the Cyber Center of Excellence was that our instructors were not putting their course content. I won't say for every course, but it was spotty. And so if you want to do it properly, you probably need some data officer to oversee every single course to ensure you're getting everything that you want in order to make sure you're getting the absolute best responses possible. If that helps. What's your next question, Chief? Chief, we're not hearing you if you're talking. Chief, you there? Okay, do we have anybody else on the line who might have a question? Hey, Travis.
Yeah, it kicked me out. Zoom on a Microsoft platform, they don't get along. I apologize, sir. But I did hear a majority of your answer. So the second question I had was in regards to the code. Is that code that you showed pulling from the open web with the amount of different techniques that are available to kind of probe a network or things of that nature?
Are you asking me, are the ADPs available? So the individual centers of excellence are not going to have to do any of the code work.
No, so I apologize. For example, when you showed the example of like, hey, how do I do a port scan, right?
Right.
In that regard, since techniques are constantly evolving and it changes on your operational environment, are those techniques pulling from the open web, or is that best practices from like the schoolhouse of how to do port scans?
So really what we did is we provided the system the instructions on how to code in a variety of different coding languages.
Okay.
We gave it a variety of different examples of the types of coding questions we might ask. But it knows how to code based off of its training, just like it knows how to respond in English or other different languages.
Okay. Yes, sir. And then the final question is, I've never served in a schoolhouse or been an instructor. I am curious if instructors are using this to create curriculum, right? Like the Gettysburg example. Where are we, or what is, I guess, the projected like line in the sand for students using Chat GPT to just answer those questions and then go back and just throw in sources? Is there an ethical dilemma that you foresee in the future with that, or is that not a concern of the schoolhouse right now? Over.
Well, the question you're asking me is more for the commandant and for CAC to respond on how we are leveraging artificial intelligence. You know, I have a son who is a junior in high school, and they are restricted right now from using ChatGPT at all. My wife is taking a doctorate down at Georgia Southern, and she's not allowed to use these tools. I think that's being short-sighted in the way that we're not embracing technology. We have to find a happy medium to where you can leverage a tool, but still show that you know the information. When you're using the tool to do all your research, to deliver your answer, and you haven't learned the material, then we have a problem. But there is a way to leverage this technology to enable you to speed the process. And I'll just go back to an Intel analyst. You know, right now we have a lot more collect than we have the ability to PED, to do the analysis. So if I can get the system to go through a ton of traffic and pull out the key nuggets that I need to point an analyst to take a look at, or I can shift through, you know, I'm a SIG by trade. So if I can get it to go through a bunch of different cuts and identify the high value cuts that I want my linguist to put his ears on first. And maybe I can even get it to translate it. Maybe I can tell it, hey, look for these key words. You know, when I was going after in coin environment VEOs, they would talk with code, right? Like birthday cake, or we're going to go to a
Yep.
party. We look for those keywords. If I can get the system to look for all that, pull it out, and then serve it up to the analyst, it saves them time.
Oh,
They
yeah.
still need to know how to do the analytical techniques, right? But if I can use the tool as a time-saving device, then I think it's to the benefit of all. If we
Oh,
do it
yeah.
a way where it deprives the analyst of their ability to think, then we've gone too far. That's Dave May's opinion.
No, I agree. I just think, like you said, leveraging the technology is so critical to me. I worry about, to an extent, within the military, is skill atrophy, right? If you have instructors that are leveraging the tool to create the prompt or whatever the case may be, does that mean that they're not qualified to an extent to in their respective trade craft, right? If the student does it, then it's an issue. Those kind of things, I mean, they'll be washed out, like you said, by the commandant, and those kind of things. But as far as like everything you described was operational there, when you talk about like the translation and VEOs and things like that, which would be at the war fighting level, and hopefully Linchpin delivers that. Um, I look forward to see where this evolves to. As a GPT user all the time, I just look at it as, if I could type into a system and I don't have to scour all that PED like you were just talking about, I'd much rather do that and just have it do the analytical techniques for me. Just because of the pace of war, right? But it'll be interesting to see where this goes, sir, and I look really forward to it. And I can't commend you and your team enough for the initiative on this. This looks awesome. Over.
But you bring up a good point. I gave you an operational response to what you asked was really an institutional question. But here's the practical piece of this. In TRADOC, centers of excellence receive money in their schoolhouses based off what's known as programs of instruction, or POI. You have to produce your POI in order, and it has to get approved by TRADOC, and you get dollars appropriated based off of that. across TRADOC, we are extremely behind in these POI updates. And so they're looking for a mechanism that will help them generate programs of instruction. This tool can do that. At the individual instructor level, I will tell you that we are running multiple classes during the day. We're running shift work in the signal school right now and we're short on instructors. Some of these instructors are overworked, overtaxed. If I can use AI to help them reduce their workload, I think that's a good thing. Especially our drill sergeants, they're getting their butts kicked. And
Oh yeah.
many hours they put in a day. So I see
So
it as a time-saving device more than anything.
in the conversations that you had, there is this also, so IP or getting POI changed and things of that nature, right? Is this also like, are we going to change policy to get POI approved more rapidly versus having to go through 7 signatures or something along those lines to make sure we're teaching the most relevant, up-to-date material? Or
It's a
how
fair
do you
question.
foresee that fitting into that, I guess?
Yeah, it's a fair question, but that is beyond the scope of where I'm prepared to talk to from the center. That's a
Absolutely, sir. All right. That works. I appreciate it.
I think did you have a question?
Well, Travis is Norman here. He said exactly what I was gonna say. I'll tell you what, if I was a student and I was told I couldn't use ChatGPT to answer something, but my instructor used it to come up with the question, man, I'd bust that guy out so quick. So, but what you're saying is right. When they're developing the POI, that would be a good time to use this, not necessarily the night prior to a quiz, because they're too late to do that material.
Right.
I think
I got a question over here. So for those online who didn't hear that, if you're using the tools properly, it's like citing someone else's work. Okay, do I have any other questions on the line?
Yes, this is Colonel Tommy Osborne, retired. Congratulations, excellent tool. The thing that I like best is that there's transparency, which is not true of a large number of generative applications. Will the slides be made available, and how can folks best prepare themselves to use the systems?
Okay, so first of all, yes, the slides are available. Chief Newsom has them, and he has full release authority from me to share them with the audience. As far as preparing, there's 2 different pieces and parts to this. Number 1 is getting the centers of excellence prepared to do the data gathering. So I am working very closely under phase 2 of this effort with the Vice Provost of Digital Education to capture the lessons learned and the methodology by which the Cyber Center of Excellence is doing this, so that we can go to every other center of excellence and say, here's how you need to gather your data. Here's where you need to park it. Here's the format it needs to be in. Give you everything possible to make your job easy. You know, and I kind of look at it like, you're going to write an OER, an NCOER. What does write look like? You know, what's the form? What's the function? We're going to try to give that to you. It's probably going to take us somewhere between 3 and 6 months to gather all that data, package it. When we come to the Intel Center of Excellence, I hope to be able to provide you an instructional guide on how to do the data gathering. That's step 1. Once we get the tool developed, we're also going to have some internal classes on how do you use a large language model. I told you before, this thing is designed to look, feel, and smell just like ChatGPT. That was purposeful, right? We want people to already know how to use a large language model when they come in here. If it looks just like ChatGPT, boom, they're going to know what to do. There are a lot of other features that I didn't talk to you about in here. It's got voice to text. It can do a variety of different things. None of that's real important. We're going to continue to evolve the capability. But I think the most important lesson out of this is how you pose your queries directly impacts the quality of the result you get. Do not use acronyms. I mean, I got a variety of different rules associated with how you get the best responses. But if you've ever played around with ChatGPT, when I first got it, I'd ask the same question 4 different ways, and I get 4 different responses. And over time, I taught myself without any formal instruction on how to best form a query to get the kind of response I wanted. But there are classes out there, and we're probably going to ask TRADOC to develop something for the user. I hope that answers your question. Okay, anyone else?
Thank you. That's very good.
Hey, sir, can you hear me?
Yes. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, this is CW2 Clint Sneed. I'm with the 75th Innovation Command, but I also work full time for the Army Research Laboratory. We have a couple efforts going on as it relates to this topic in the somewhat theoretical space, that we're funding some work out in academia to study human machine interface as it relates to the complications and some of the challenges and how you go about solving, how humans interface with large language models and, in an attempt to better tune them, better automate processes. I'd like to reach out to you after the fact and see if you're interested in taking a look and engaging on that effort as well from a government perspective.
I'd be happy to. I appreciate the offer. I do want to say to the general audience here, there are a lot of industry partners that will be willing very quickly to offer you a similar capability if you just buy their product. I know I won't name any particular company, but I know of at least a half dozen who says, hey, I can deliver this for you tomorrow for a price. I built this tool with 3 primary people, me being one of them, and I'm not the smartest tool, and about 30 other personnel across the cyber center. Most of folks doing this as an additional duty. I didn't spend a single dollar. Now, granted, I had a high-speed lieutenant who knew how to code the user interface and how to build a vector database and the RAG and all that stuff that went with it. But AI2C has agreed to do this for TRADOC for every center of excellence. They're going to do the heavy coding portion of this. All we have to do is create the corpuses of data. Now, someone still has to pay the bill for the compute and store in the enterprise, and that is a challenge right now. The Army does not have a good enterprise solution for compute and store. Sea Army, all that stuff you hear about, there's all kinds of challenges right now with that, and it is a hurdle. But at the end of the day, you can pay a whole lot of money for this, or we can look internally, do something for our soldiers at a very low cost. And I just throw that to you because you can pay a lot of big money, or we can learn to do some of this stuff on our own. Okay, one more question, and I'm going to call it.
Hey, sir, Colonel Scott, retired. The part about the human-machine interface, I really think that if we understand artificial intelligence and how humans view it, anything with artificial in front of it is automatically viewed as it's really not real. What we have here is really assisted, if you understand it from the perspective of it is assisting us with intelligence. It's not fake. Artificial intelligence back in the 2000s when I was doing master's work and we were just starting to get the feel of where artificial intelligence would take us, then we have to realize that at some point, this is not artificial. This is information that's out there that is being correlated in structured query languages and databases to allow us as humans to be able to assist in providing the mission command the information they need. Now, where we may fail is just like we as adults and have children and we're asking them to limit time on these devices because they're spending too much time on screen time, it dwarfs, it affects us on how we view information coming to us, that we actually will ignore things. So somehow in the human machine interface, there's got to be a way for all of us to understand that the best way to understand any assisted information that's coming to us is to have a rested mind, number one, and number two, to be able to quickly assess when something comes to us, is this really happening? I.e., have we done our own day-to-day current events, knowing what's going on? So when something comes to us, we can immediately start the processes, procedures to do what we're required to do in our roles and responsibilities.
Great comment.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Again, my name is Dave May. I'm at the Cyber Center. You can look me up if you have any questions. I will end with the fact that the Intel Capability Development Integration, or CDID, is doing some great work with Project Linchpin. From what I saw today, a lot of that work is aspirational today, but I think they are going to create an environment that will allow us to build future capabilities at multiple classification levels. That is in the works, but again, it does not exist today. So don't think Project Linchpin is going to solve your problems tomorrow. It's going to be a little way down the road. But we are making some good strides. And to the last comment, this does not alleviate anyone from critical thinking. As intelligence professionals, we should always be looking at everything with a critical eye and making our own human assessment. So thanks for your time today. I hope you learned something. And if you want to be part of the team, feel free to reach out. Chief, back over to you.
I'm gonna just end out today's briefing. Thank everybody for attending. And if you have any questions, additional questions for Mr. May, just shoot them to me via email. And you can reach out to Chief Joyce, who is the president of the Rocks, or myself, if you want to join our organization. Over.